Hey gamers! I'm the dog suit power-up that doesn't have any special attack abilities, but it does let you smell other players' butts. Scott.
Amazing.
How do you follow that?
I was like, yeah, wow, okay, perfect. That's what I'll do my best. Hey gamers, I am the snapback sweetheart, man of Mario, Chambo.
And you can call me Red Mushroom because I'm about to make you get real big, baby. It's me, Patrick. Welcome to RPGaymer. Oh god, I don't know what episode it is. Is this 6? Shit. Welcome to RPGaymer Season 4, Episode 6, a podcast about the Mario series.
Amazing. I love it.
So you can see we're all kinds of professional here already.
It's so great. It makes me feel at home. I love it.
Yeah.
That was the first time I didn't tell Patrick my cold open before the start, so I'm glad that it
Oh, that was fantastic.
that was
I love
good.
it.
went over okay.
Was
The
a
element of
good one.
surprise.
It's always impressive when I find out that my husband can in fact be funny. Well, we are back here for another episode of Wonderful RPGaymer, and today we are joined, before we get to our topic, with a very special guest. We have Chambo in the audience today. I would like to welcome you, friend. It is so great do this with you today. As usual, I would love to start out with a few questions about you and who you are and what you do. So, Scott, you said that you were going to take the reins on this. Why don't you get us started with the rolling interview?
No. So, I mean, you took my first several questions right out of my mouth. So, so for our listeners who may not know you, Chambo, can you give us a quick little intro? Like, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Chambo. It's really easy to remember. It rhymes with rainbow. There's a funny story about how the name came up, but we'll get to that maybe. I don't know. My shtick is I'm a full-time content creator, predominantly on Twitch, a little bit on YouTube as well. And basically, I play video games. I really sink my teeth into the Mario series. We do a really fun little spin-off called Kaizo, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later.
Definitely,
but
definitely.
Yeah, super fun. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been doing it for the better part of 4.5 years now, and it's kind of nice when you wake up and you go, I get to play a video game for work today. So that's always a good place to be. So
yeah, that is a good place to be. I think I'm the only one on the call that doesn't get to do that, I guess, which is fine. Whatever. I'm not bitter or anything. So speaking of, your Twitch and YouTube, can you just, I'm glad that we were able to wrangle you for today because you just finished a huge subathon, right? Can you tell us about that?
We did, yeah. So this was our second subathon. For those that maybe don't know what a subathon is, basically you go live and there's a timer, and the timer stays up for as long as people keep subscribing or cheering with bits or donating or tipping you. Any form of monetization adds to that timer, and so that timer just slowly keeps going down and then goes back up. And we stream 24/7, which means I'm sleeping on camera, which is a little bit weird, but I like to give the people what they want. So
you truly do the full time. You don't do what some of them do, where they'll have like schedule entertainment, or maybe like someone else will chime in or something like that. Or I think like Jaden, what she did one time was she had like her viewers control the Pokemon game that she was playing. Like, you are actually on camera the full time.
I will say for the full time with an asterisk, because I do still have to kind of live my life outside of the stream, like grocery shopping and stuff like that. And so when I do that, I usually have like a special guest come on and fill in for me while I'm gone. But one thing that was really cool about our subathon is we set up my house as kind of like a big brother house. So I had cameras in my kitchen and my living room and my bedroom and obviously my stream room. So chat could control which camera they could look at whenever. And so when I would go to sleep, I would just have the camera on in my bedroom, and then there'd be like a little mini game playing overnight. And yeah, I was just on camera for 24/7 for about 31 days this time. A full month on stream.
Days. Have you recovered yet, like physically and mentally? Or are you still just kind of like getting back into this?
It's so weird because like I think I have recovered. It definitely took like a week. I was like, oh, I'll take 2 days off. We'll be back at it on Monday, guys. It'll be great. And then Monday came and I was like,
no,
I'm taking the week. I need a break. You've seen enough of me. And everybody totally understood. So I think I'm good. We're back into the mix of things now. It's always sort of bittersweet when it ends because, after 31 days, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to, not be on camera in my own house for a little bit. But then it ends and you're kind of like, oh, I wish it kept going, So it's a little bit weird, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Our co-host, the other co-host, Jason, just got back from Japan. And I feel like it took him a shorter time to recover from all the time changing that it probably did for you for like 31 days of being in a panopticon of viewership. So that's insane.
Yeah, this was our second one, so I at least went into this one knowing kind of what it was going to be like and what it was going to feel like. But yeah, it's definitely tough. It's not the norm, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So for our viewers who are listening, so I guess for our listeners, that's what it's called when you listen instead of watch. So for our listeners who are listening, you're also wearing a super cute shirt right now that says proud. So you are an out and proud gamer as well. So how has your experience been being, a full-time content creator, but also being a gamer with a Y?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. First thing about the shirt. So it does say proud. This is made by my good friend, I Am the Ratio. He's also a Mario streamer on Twitch. He and his LGBTQI plus daughter designed the shirt and they sold it as merch. And it's really cool. So we had to support the homie and so it's just lovely.
It's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing, that's kind of, I think, always sort of the big, I'm going to put myself on the internet there as a queer streamer. What's that going to be like, right? And sure, there's always the sort of negative aspects of it that kind of come with that. But there's so many amazing moments that I get to create a community of gamers with a Y and all the people that fit into that to just kind of be themselves and be safe and meet really cool people and game with groups of people that they otherwise wouldn't have met. So it's been absolutely fantastic. And the other stuff that comes with it, we kind of turn it into a little game for ourselves and sort of roll with it and just really have a good time with it because there's so much love in our community that none of that stuff's going to keep us down at all. So
it's nice when gaming can be, without the Y, gaming can be the platform because I think it is a great connector for a lot of people of a lot of like genders and sexual identities where like we can all bond over something and get along over something, and it gives a bridge for people to really like connect with one another. And I know like for me in college, that was one way that I connected with a lot of the straight boys where like I was a gamer and I could talk the lingo with them. So I'm sure like in some way it's the same for you. It's just like really great. It is a nice way to find people who are like you, and it's a nice way to find people who have the same interests in you as you.
Totally. Well, and it's so universal, right? That everyone is a gamer in some fashion, whether you're playing on a console or on PC or on your phone. The Candy Crush saga of the, middle-aged to later old ladies that were playing on their phones. They're gamers. They're playing Candy Crush, which I could not care less about the Candy Crush game. But, it's just everybody's playing something, and so we can all sort of speak that same language, which I think is really, really cool.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of games, while we're here, why don't we talk about probably one of the, if not the most well-known gaming series of all time, Mario, which is your forte. And I'm honestly shocked it's taken us 4 seasons to talk about the Mario series. Like, here we are 4 seasons later. It's trickled into conversations, but we are officially talking about this series. So I guess I want to know for everyone, because I think this is going to be a different starting point based on like ages and when we got into gaming. When did the Mario series first enter your life? Chambo, why don't we go ahead and start with you? Because Scott's not
For sure. The Mario series was my very first gaming experience. I'm an 87 baby, and so it was right around the time when the NES was kind of around and Mario sort of hit the shelves as the first, at home video game kind of thing that really hit it mainstream and made a huge impact. So my first gaming experience was we were visiting my grandparents who live in a different province than I do in Canada. I was really, really young, and my grandmother had this NES, and she had Duck Hunt, which was the Duck Hunt and Mario 1 combo NES cartridge, if you remember that. It had
sure do.
She had the little blaster and everything, so she was playing Duck Hunt, and then I got a chance to kind of take a look at it, and I played the other game, which was Mario 1, Super Mario Brothers for the NES, and just non-stop played it, just couldn't put it down. It was my life. I just loved it so very much. So that's kind of how I got into it, and then from there.
I'm actually the exact same boat as you. I'm a year older than you, so I'm an 86 baby, and it like almost the exact same story aside sub grandparents for my parents. Mario was the first video game I ever played. I think we may have had an Atari, but like I was too young at that point. But like my earliest memories as a 3-year-old is playing Mario 1. And I remember like my parents playing Duck Hunt and Mario, and my brother and I being upstairs and being able to tell how far in the game they were based on like the sound, because you get to the second the second level and it's the dun dun dun, but my brother and I be shouting at them like, you made it to the second world, and being so happy, and then shouting up to us, go to bed.
You should be
like
asleep.
You should be asleep. So I think it's so cool to talk to people who, and this is no shame to anyone, because again, everyone starts in their own points, but to find people who entered something from the very beginning. I just think that's there's that nice specialness, because you really get the full arc and appreciation of everything. You don't have to theorize or suppose this is why this might have been meaningful. If you come in later, you truly saw like the full breadth. So that's just so cool. So I'm happy I get to share that with you,
that's awesome.
Fellow Canadian.
That's right. Yes.
Well, now that you all shared your special time together, I guess I'll just, echo that I'm an 89 baby, but it was like the same thing. Like I grew up very like lower class in the States. And the Nintendo in my family, like we had one fairly early. It's like some of my earliest memories of being a human we're playing the original Nintendo and like our shitty little trailer here in Indy, because it was just like so entry level. It was like something that everybody had, and to your point, like we had the Duck Hunt and Mario games. So I just remember, some of my earliest memories are playing Mario, and then specifically Duck Hunt, which I love the most because we had the guns, like the gun controllers. Yeah. And I just remember being on my parents' waterbed in their room and playing Duck Hunt, and like with my big sister, and like bouncing around the waterbed to throw her off because we were always competing. And so it was just like some of the little earliest memories that I actually have are playing Mario and Duck Hunt on the Nintendo.
I mean, not Mario, but so iconic was the gun that it actually was the focus of its own cartoon called Captain N, which like included a bunch of Nintendo properties and characters and whatnot. But like, there's something magical about the experience, because not only was it you had your standard controller, but you literally had the laser light gun too. It was so cool.
Well, I think like this might be getting ahead of us, but like that's something that I think Nintendo's sort of kept going forward, is these unique controllers and different play experiences. Like that's why, Nintendo, although I don't necessarily agree with all the decisions they make in terms of game releases and things like that, they still create incredible play experiences, and I love them for that. So
definitely are the most experimental and like willing to take those risks. And like it's funny, Scott doing a little research to get ready for this episode and talking about how big of a flop the Wii U was, but if it wasn't for the Wii U, we wouldn't have the Switch. Or we may not have like as much success with a system like the DS or the 3DS. So they're definitely take the risks, but I mean, like usually at some point they end up paying off. Aside from what was the infrared one? That one was never going to land.
Oh, the Virtual Boy.
Yeah, the Virtual Boy. Thank
you. Have you ever seen inside a Virtual Boy? It is.
I played. I remember going to Kmart in my hometown.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they had one on display,
weird.
and you were just like, it's uncomfortable. I feel like I have an astigmatism because of that game. Like,
I think, ruining children's eyes from way back.
Quite literally. Well, I think since we're like, we talked about our entry point for Mario, and we kind of touched on how it has a meaning for us. Why do you think, or what do you think Mario means to the world? Like, obviously, this is such a big thing, but I'm curious from your standpoint, like, what do you see Mario is to this, like, wonderful blue and green little planet that we have?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, with back in the early 90s and video games kind of hitting the home console market and things like that, I think obviously Mario and SMP1 had a huge impact on at-home video gaming and really kind of set the bar, which, is impactful in terms of that kind of industry. But in terms of like enjoyment and accessibility or approachability to everyone, Mario's just really simple. Like it's a really simple concept of a game, or a genre of games, 2D platforming, 3D platforming, whatever. But it also spans a lot of age groups, I think. You can find enjoyment at a really young kid's age, whether you're playing, Super Mario Bros. Wonder right now as Yoshi, where you're not going to take any damage. So it's really accessible for like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old to play. And then you can span all that way up to different kinds of games for different adults who, like myself, I'm still going to say mid-30s, even though I think it's a lie. I'm a mid-30-year-old who
upper mid-30.
Yeah, who's playing like nonstop a Mario game from, the 90s that now fans have taken in and creating their own spins on it. It's super difficult and really challenging. So I think it's really approachable to everybody in terms of an enjoyment level as well as potential skill levels and difficulty.
That's it. I really actually never thought about the accessibility of it, and I think that's a good thing to discuss. And back to like I was talking about Nintendo, another part that makes them a really great company in terms of just like game design is that accessibility, where like anyone could pick up and play. Anyone could pick up a lot of Zelda games or Mario games, Pokemon games, and whatnot, just because they are built for the everyman, which I know a lot of people have a lot of complaints about in some capacity, but in other capacities, if you're not just thinking about yourself, it can be really great. I know that's how
Totally.
Scott and I bond a lot over a lot of the games that we play. It's specifically the Nintendo series for that reason. Like, we will play some PlayStation games together, but I feel like aside from maybe one or two, Scott doesn't get as into them as he does Mario. What do you think, Scott?
I don't know. I echo a lot of those thoughts, but especially the accessibility things, because I appreciate that the story is so simple, but also so fantastical in a way that's so adaptable. Because going back to like thinking about your parents, Patrick, playing that, because I know them personally, or even like my parents who like could care less about video games now versus then, like the story was it was fantastical, but it also was like, it wasn't super story driven. So you didn't have to worry about the story and you could just have fun with like the actual mechanics, because the mechanics were so easy. But also like even the accessibility of the controller, you had 2 buttons and a D-pad. So like just about anybody could like, pick that up and like play it. So I think to me, it was like the combination of like the accessibility of the games, the accessibility of the system, both of obtaining one in home for the first time, but also the controllers, the fun of the controllers. I think that all was just the perfect like amalgamation of things and timing and, pop culture that just kind of led it to, what it is now. And that's why I think it's, kind of, we still do it.
Well, and this kind of touches into like what I want to talk about next. Like I want to talk about why you think Mario is so capable of entering so many different like styles, because there's so many different types of Mario games. But if we boil it down to the main games, kind of what I think you're saying, Scott, a lot of different series. If you go to the starting point and the ending point, you don't necessarily see the trajectory. Like there might be a lot of experimentation, but I think like core Mario, it's still the same game. It is run, jump, pick up some power-ups, sure, but at the end of the day, like Goombas you still jump on, Koopas you still jump on and kick their shells. I think there's just such that familiarity. Continuing off of that, like Mario just seems seamlessly jump into all of these different types of games, whether that's sports, RPGs. Like, why do you think that is? How can this relatively generic character find his way into so many different genres?
Yeah, I mean, just the long run that Mario has had. This is our beloved plumber from the Mushroom Kingdom who's trying to save Princess Peach from the clutches of Bowser, right? Like, who doesn't love that already from a fantastical standpoint? And then you can just you want to root for that hero, and now we can dip him into to kind of every other genre, whether it's like an RPG genre or a sports genre, and I think Nintendo's done that really well in terms of dipping this lovable platformer guy into a sports game, but making the sports game not super stressful or not super demanding. It's still fun. It's crazy. We have racing game where we're throwing bananas and shells at each other. Like, it's just ridiculous. But it makes that kind of genre a little bit more accessible because it's Mario. It's going to be fun.
Sure.
What's interesting to me is that we haven't really seen that too much with other characters. Like, let's use Sonic as an example because they always got pitted up against each other from the Sega Nintendo. We don't really see Sonic dipping into like the different genres. It's always kind of been the same. And I don't know why that is, other than the fact that I think just everybody can like relate more to Mario and really get behind him. I don't know.
I'm wondering if it's partially too that like Mario was refined and perfected so early and Sonic was not. I don't think there's a good grasp of what Sonic is. Like, he didn't translate to 3D games well. Mario did. So I think what you're kind of like saying, or what you were saying there, maybe it's explained by because it was already done, perfected so well, it's like they can focus on the what is next. But if you think of a platformer like Sonic, it's like there are some great elements to this game, but there are some big issues because Sonic did have an RPG on the DS. It did not go well.
I didn't even know it had an RPG.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. He had a DS RPG. It was just like bland. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing really special about it. But Mario's had many, and I think it's just because, like, again, that core you take and you apply it to so many different games. I mean, Mario Golf is like a golfing RPG on the Game Boy Color, but like at the end of the day, like you still feel like this is still a Mario game, and it's so weird, and it doesn't even have some of those things. But Mario, boom, exactly what it is. So I'm wondering if that could be why.
Yeah,
you're right. I was touching on it a little bit earlier. I think it's all of those things. It's like it's just fantastical enough. I think even to like the Sonic example is like, does Sonic have a story other than like you're trying to save the animals that have been turned into robots? Like, and
something about emeralds. But I mean, like, Mario never has a story aside to save the princess,
But that's what I mean. Like, it has a little bit more of a traditional like hero story. Like, there is a princess that you're trying to save. You're like a literal relatable human plumber man trying to save the pretty princess, right? And we all want to be that hero, and it's even for people who don't game, it's still, you don't have to suspend belief that much to be a plumber. It's just that, through the settings and through the other characters is when you get to a little bit more fantastical and have to suspend belief. But it's just so easily applied to so many different genres and things, and it's just like it's such a good base level that you add a sport and it changes it, but it's still the same thing. You add a third dimension, you take them out and put them in a different place, like a physical place, like outer space, and it's still Mario. It's just like they just change one thing about it.
Sure.
And they've always just been like really intentional about that, and I think they've they learn from their mistakes too, it seems like, and they still keep pushing through, which I also think has made it applicable to all these other styles, because I mean, we're talking about how many styles that it seamlessly transitions to, but also there were some that it hasn't. Like there are a bunch of Mario games that we try to forget about. So
sure, I feel like those are the ones that just like go so far from the formula. But like, I agree. I was even thinking too. So I think Sonic had sports games, but I think the Sonic sports games were Mario games because it was like Mario versus Sonic Olympics or something like that.
Exactly.
So funny. Okay. Well, I feel like this is probably a really obvious answer for you, but I'm still curious, because I think this is something for each of us. We might have slightly different answers. But what is your favorite style of Mario game if we take a look at the full scope? And maybe we'll include that a little bit, where if it's just platformers, like what type of platformer do you specifically like in terms of the Mario genre?
I think it's a tough one because there's so many great So many great options. I think for me, the 2D platformer style is very much where I fit in.
Kind of had a feeling.
Yeah, right. That's not to say like I love the 3D games. Even some of the RPG games are really, really fun. I'm not a huge RPG type of gamer in terms of like turn-based combat and stuff like that isn't really my thing. But they're really cute and adorable. But the thing that I love about like, let's say Thousand Year Door is the 2D platforming stuff when you're walking around the world. So that's very much where I fit in, is the 2D stuff. It's simplified. You can kind of go crazy with tech and movement and stuff like that and just kind of fly through levels, and that's my bread and butter for sure.
I mean, yeah, I think based on what you do and how much content you make about it, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
What about you,
surprises.
Scott?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I guess I toe the line a little bit more. I think it really just depends on the title, because I do really like 2D, like the 2D platformers, just because they're easy for me to pick up and put down. And even thinking back to some of the older ones, like the level based, like the more level based it is, the easier it is to like pick up, play for a few minutes, and then you can be done whenever. You don't have to remember a lot. Mm-hmm. But some of the 3D ones are still like super fun and are, I don't know, and maybe it's just because like a lot of them are tied to like playing them with you. But I do have some. I don't know. I kind of toe the line between it. I guess it really just depends. But
okay.
But yeah, it depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
I am split as well. I love a lot of different like Mario takes. I mean, whether it's Mario Kart, the racing games, or I mean, you could consider Smash a Mario game potentially, but for me, I think like split on the platformers and the RPGs, just because I think the RPGs do some things that a lot of future RPGs in non-Mario scope have really like learned from, like kind of trend setting, even like something as simple as pressing a button before you attack or before you get hit from Super Mario RPG has made a lot of other games so much better. But if we're talking just platformers, I think the 3D adventure ones are probably my favorite, because I think they push the limit of what Mario is a lot more. Whereas if I play a 2D Mario for the most part, I think like it's just more polish and refined experiences, which is why I think like they make really great for speedrunning and kaizoing and whatnot. But I think like at the same time, it's hard to answer that, because playing Wonder completely like turns that upside down, and all of a sudden it's like,
game,
it changed the game, because what would have been a refined experience now has those bonker ideas. So I like, but for me, I think the 3D adventures are probably my favorite. Okay. So, I do want to hear your opinions about kaizoing, but let's first talk about like base Mario design. What do you think goes into a well-designed Mario level? And then we'll go into like right after that, what goes into a good kaizo level. And you might need to break down kaizo a little bit first, Scott, because I know he's like seen a video here and there, but you might need to give like the full definition
we
of
could talk about it for sure.
Yeah.
I think, okay. So just in terms of, well-designed Mario levels, kind of as a whole from let's say like a Nintendo standpoint, or really anywhere. I think obviously first and foremost, what makes a good level is it's fun. It's got to be fun. Mm-hmm. If it's tedious and annoying and there's something you have to do that just, takes you really out of the play experience, I think that's when it kind of falls apart, at least for me.
Sure.
So I think designing for fun, first of all. Difficulty, I didn't really care so much about. If it's too easy or too difficult, that doesn't really matter to me in terms of a good level design. I think one thing that Nintendo does really well is sort of theming their levels as well, especially when we get into something like Wonder, where, okay, you're in this area of the world that maybe has, these kind of enemies throughout it. Most of your levels are going to see that and see those similar mechanics, whether it's a wall jump or a spin twirl jump, or a double jump or something like that. So you're sort of sinking the player into this idea that this is the kind of skill set you're going to need to get through this level. And so you kind of immerse them in that mechanic or that theme.
Sure.
And then kind of have fun throughout it, right?
Like this is the water area, so you're going to see a lot more water levels. So now we're really going to polish your water skills for when you get a random water level later. That's going to be a lot more difficult.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So you sort of introduce stuff kind of as you're going through the game, and then there's obviously some big culmination at the end where you kind of have to use all of them, which I think is nice that it leads up to that. But in terms of like an individual level, yeah, I think it's got to be fun, and it's got to be unique to itself in terms of like the other levels that are there. You don't want to be doing a ton of the same thing. Oh, I just did a level like that where I have to, do whatever. I just did that one 2 levels ago, and now we're doing the same thing. Like, it's going to feel stale. So there's always kind of got to be some progression and difference, I guess, into each level. I think that's what really boils it down for me.
How do you think that translates into the 3D space? Because, like, do you think that a design for a 2D level and a design for a 3D level is, like, what makes them better is the same? Or do you think that adding the extra dimension changes that?
I think adding the extra dimension changes a lot, to be honest, because I think, when you're looking at a 2D game or 2D level, you have a start point and you're getting to an end point. That's when the level is completed. Whereas like in a 3D game, maybe the emphasis is on exploration, whether it's collecting things, whether it's moons in Odyssey or, collecting like a red coins in an SM64 or a Sunshine level or something like that. So it's less maybe about getting from one point to the next and more about using the space you have around you and the skills you have provided within your power-ups or your design to kind of explore and see that whole world. So I think it's definitely a different feel.
Sure. I think that makes sense. I know for me, just for like 2D levels, I think once you have the basis of like the skill set down and usually your first world of this is like the core of what you need, I think what goes into a good level design is actually pressure. From then on, like how much pressure you can apply in however you set up the level, and that could be any of little things. That could be the number of monsters or how large the gaps are or like what the skill level is. Obviously, if I'm talking like full game design, variety I think is the best thing, because you do want to have those like peaks and valleys and whatnot. But for a singular level, I think whatever element that might be, if it's a 3D level, it could be limited oxygen. If it's a 2D level, it could be something that's continuously chasing you down. And I think that to me like is what spices things up, because I like games when there is that little bit of challenge, and I don't think challenge necessarily has to be a scary word, but it makes for those exciting moments, because I don't always remember the level that was just kind of like I could whimsically climb through it. I don't, but I do remember the level that made me be like, oh fuck. And like even something like in Wonder, where you have those levels where you're constantly bouncing up on top of something to get higher and higher to get the Wonder Flower, like something as simple as that is still putting pressure on you. So I think it's those, how does the level create that pressure moment? Yeah,
definitely. Well, I think like what you're talking about, that pressure or that challenge word, I think that's what a lot of us who game regularly are looking for, is that we want to overcome that challenge, that sense of achievement of we did this. That's why, taking a step away from Mario, the Dark Souls series and the Soulsborne games, like those games are hard. Those games are fucking hard. Yeah. But that feeling when you beat Margit or Melania or something in Elden Ring is just like you don't get that feeling from anything else in gaming. It's just so spectacular and
truly peak.
Without that, yeah, right. And that might be an extreme example because those games are so hard. But same thing in Wonder. Some of those last challenges in Star World they're gonna push. They pushed me, and I game for a living. They pushed me to my limits in some of those levels. They're pretty tough, but you feel incredible when you get through them. So,
Scott, how about for you? What goes into like a good level design for you?
Yeah, I think you hit one of my points on the head is in like the variety. But to take it a step further, I think to even something that Chambo you were saying about like the variety in different things that you can do, but I think even like the variety that they present throughout an entire game in the different levels, I think is really special for a lot of reasons. One, because it keeps you interested, but two, like a lot of there's always something for everybody. Like there will always be some of those like new skills that you learn that I'm gonna hate, but there will always be some that I super love and wish I could like take throughout the whole game. And I think that Mario has always done a really good job at like keeping that variety without being too much. The other thing that comes to mind for me when thinking about the Mario games and what makes the levels well designed is also the balance of them, because I really appreciate how well they handle the balance of like learning a new skill but not like beating it into the ground. I mean, they do that sometimes, but for the most part,
do you mean like the mastery requirement is not high?
Yeah, I think so, but it's also like I think of other like platformers like I think there's like a few levels in Shovel Knight where you get like a new tool, and it's like you literally cannot do anything in the level without using that tool. And I think Mario does a good job of like not doing that. Like you have to use the tool to get through, or like the new ability or whatever it is. You have to use it to get through the level, but it's not like every single thing you do is only this.
Yeah, truly.
And I think it does. Yeah. And I think it like they do a good job of like building up to the point of like you might get this new skill for this new world, and like each level in the new world, it gets a little bit harder like using that skill, but it's not like it's just well balanced. It's not just like you have to be an expert to get through this very first level.
I think that's really fair with your like direction on that for sure. Like I think margin of error is a key point for casual gamers, and obviously when I say the word casual, like that is just the most like general term. There's no offense for being just like a more casual gamer, because like we're talking about accessible games and whatnot, and how that is something that like you want people to come in who don't game a ton, who don't want to have to worry about mastery of skill. But speaking of no margin for error and mastery of skill, why don't you go into Kaizoing for us, and then maybe what goes into a good design Kaizo level?
Yeah, for sure. So as you guys said, I do a little thing called Kaizo, Super Mario World, and so Super Mario World was the Mario game for the Super Nintendo, where it introduces Yoshi and certain things in the Mushroom Kingdom. Really, really, really cool. But there's this genre of fan-made games called Kaizo,
and this is not stuff made on Mario Maker. This is like fan-generated fan software, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So this is it's technically what's called a ROM hack. So you're basically, and those kind of exist for everything. There's ROM hacks of A Link to the Past or OOT, where you're playing it's in the same engine, you're just playing a different game with all the same mechanics that are there. Same thing with Super Mario World. We're doing a ROM hack of it, and in this case, it's a Kaizo one. Kaizo, coming from Japan, is loosely translated to sort of redesigned, reimagined, and just kind of like refreshed, basically. So you're just kind of changing it. It's not a difficulty. I think a lot of people get hung up on Kaizo is just really hard. And that's not necessarily the case. Kaizo is just, there's kind of, here, I'll step back. My sort of definition of what Kaizo is kind of like its obstacle course Mario.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of different opinions about what makes a Kaizo, what makes it not, and the thing with a Kaizo level is typically the creator of that level has designed the path through that level in one way. You're only going to get from start to finish doing exactly what the creator has asked you to do, whether it's bounce on this Koopa to that Goomba, throw that shell there, and go. If you try to approach it any other way, you're just not going to make it. You're going to fall in a pit or hit a spike or whatever. So there's this whole community around Kaizo Super Mario World, and a ton of different ROM hack creators and level designers that specialize in this Kaizo genre and creating these obstacle courses of levels into not just singular levels, which exist in Mario Maker. There's Kaizo levels in Mario Maker that people will just put in one level. But they've created whole hacks of 20 levels or 15 or 62, depending on how big they want to go. And so that's kind of been my piece of the gaming world for a long time now.
I think is it Super Rad or someone like created a full like training Kaizo hack, and it is literally like 10 levels of like what commonly pops up in a Kaizo experience, whether that's like getting trolled, you know what I mean, like a little trolling experiences, or like dropping in from a checkpoint into immediate death if you don't like move right away. So I thought that was really cool. But first of all, they're really fun to watch for anybody that hasn't seen them. I watch a lot of them. Like most of the time I will watch someone like you, Chambo, or like just some random people like First Name But. It's great content to just like go on a treadmill at the gym. You'd be surprised how quickly the time flies by watching someone do that. But it kind of does seem like it is a little bit of that. Like I was saying, the margin of error is just minimal, which a lot of people again might think of as a difficulty thing. But I think once you have, this is kind of the same thing. Once you have the skills, once you know how to do a shell jump, once you kind of figure out the intended path, you'll make it through. It's almost like a lovely dance, right? In a way.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, is like once you kind of understand what is required, like I always say 70% of getting through a Kaizo level is just knowing what to do. You have to figure out that puzzle of what tactic do I have to use here? What mechanic do I need to get from here to there? Once I know that, okay, now I can execute it, we can go. But sometimes it's just figuring it out. And you can have a Kaizo level that's incredibly difficult with things like shell jumps and weird cape tech and stuff like that. Or you can have a really, really approachable Kaizo level that is made by a 9-year-old who can be beaten by anybody. And it's literally just, you have to jump from a platform and bounce on a Koopa, and there's no ground. And you got to bounce on these Koopas all the way to the end. There's only one way to beat that. That's a Kaizo level. You have to do that. Whereas in a standard level, you can maybe walk on the ground, get a power-up, shoot the Koopa with a flower, and then walk across or whatever, right? So that's, I think, why Kaizo is really cool, is that you kind of have to get into the brain of the creator and go, how did they make this? How did they approach it? And that's how I'm going to
really big experience of the floor is lava.
Yeah, it totally is.
But sometimes it's not lava, but it's still lava.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
What are some of your favorite Kaizo levels that you've ever played? Whether that's just like the way they're designed or a specific one.
Yeah. So, well, this is a little bit of a biased answer, but one of my moderators for my team has created a Kaizo hack for me called Super Chambo World. So that's near and dear to my heart. I love it. It's challenging. It's great. It's really sweet. It's really fun. If you haven't checked it out, you should check it out. It's really good. But I have another soft spot for a ROM hack called Invictus. So it's about a 22 level Kaizo ROM hack made by Juz Cook, an Australian Kaizo creator who's pretty big in the Mario Maker community as well. And that was the first Kaizo that I had seen. I had seen that played at or ran at SGDQ as a speed run. And I was just like, what is this? Like, I remember playing Super Mario World, but I've now seen it just done in a completely different way, and that kind of just sent me. And I had to go down the path of what is Kaizo, where do I get this, how do I play it, and
what specifically, like what were things that you saw in there that was like, this is it?
Just the movement, the level design, like what you're doing in each level, as it was phenomenal. That's the first time I'd seen a shell jump, for example, and just
which are really scary, like. Scott,
they are free. They're really easy once you learn how to do them.
You're jumping toward a wall, and you have a shell in your hand, and you let go of it at a time, so that way, like, it's bounces off the wall and sinks enough that you still land on it to propel you up.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. I have seen very few of these, but I feel like it's also because, Patrick, you're always like, oh my God, check this out. So maybe I feel like you only show me the really hard ones, where I'm just like, how do these people do, why do these people do this?
Yeah, he gets anxiety just from watching them. So.
They can be very anxiety-inducing levels in Kaizo for sure. There's some
if there are like 9-year-olds making levels, if I can do like the Kaizo Academy or whatever that you were talking about, I could be into that. But like,
yeah, well, and so specifically with Kaizo, it's kind of funny. The kind of first, sort of well-known or first Kaizo game to be put kind of on the map is literally called Kaizo Mario World 1. It's made by Takamoto, who is infamous in the SMW community. But
was that the one that was also nicknamed Asshole Mario?
Asshole Mario, yeah. Okay. It circled the internet, and it was regarded as Asshole Mario. And the whole, I don't know the entire story of it, but basically I think what it boils down to is Takamoto's friend was touted as just being really, really good at Super Mario World. So Takamoto made this game for him. He's like, I'm going to make this game for you that's really hard. You're going to die all the time. It's going to troll you constantly. And that's how we got Kaizo Mario World 1 also known as asshole Mario. And so I think that's why Kaizo a lot of times gets this like difficulty stigma attached to it, is that it's really made. That one was made to be hard.
Sure.
It was made to be played with save states. You're not supposed to get through it without gaming over, all that kind of stuff. But as kind of time has progressed through the Kaizo world, we've created tutorial hacks. We've created beginner-friendly Kaizo games where you're not required to do any of those crazy shell jumps or stuff.
I need
it's
those.
just,
I need those.
Yeah, and those are super fun. They can be just adorable and like just fun to play. And one that comes to my mind is Super Moo World. That's just this like these little cute cows everywhere, and you kind of play through and you're trying to save Maggie Moo from King Boo at the end. Like it's just really adorable. It's pretty simple.
Okay.
You don't have to go crazy.
You had me
tech.
until Maggie Moo, but other than that, I'm in.
It's funny, like here it is, a sub community making Mario accessible, which again is like what we said is kind of the core of Mario. Like it's just so great. Yeah.
There's something for everybody, which I love. And then there's the crazy hardcore stuff that is kind of more where I dip my toes into a lot more. But there's a difficulty, I think, for everybody who wants to get into it. And the best thing I can say about Kaizo is, or ROM hacks in general, is we get to take these games from our childhood, or at least from my childhood that I love and spent so much time playing, so many hours playing, that now I get to re-experience that in a whole new way. Different game, different music, different graphics, but I'm still playing the core game that I love. So that's why I keep going back to it.
If it helps validate you, I do the same thing with Final Fantasy, same thing. There are fan hacks of the original games, and sometimes they'll just add in future classes from future games and put them in what they would have been if they were in Final Fantasy 1, or they'll make more like hardcore fine experiences of Final Fantasy 6. So like I get it. Like it makes complete sense to me. You already have this thing that you enjoy, but you're a big boy now, so let's put some big boy pants on it, so that way you can just like have that little extra joy while you're playing. It's great.
Totally.
And that's a wrap on part 1 of this week's episode. We'll be back next week with part 2, so you can hear the rest of our gaming related shenanigans. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, so you never miss an episode of RPGaymer.